Hello everyone, this is Ponderosa North for the love of Bonanza. I'm going to break this one up into two parts because there's just too much to cover in one episode. These are stories about Pernell Roberts by friends and family, and they're sort of a collection of stories by Encimiano, who is writing a book about Pernell apparently. I don't know what's happening with it. And this is a collection of stories on his Facebook page, Pernell Roberts Jr. Facebook page, so you can take a look there. But like I said, I'm going to separate this into two because there's a lot to cover. A lot of great stories here. Let's begin. Early in his career, Pernell worked the hard way. I remember once when I was in Washington, I saw him at the Arena Theater. He had learned how to build sets, work lights, do makeup, paint scenery. It was from the bottom up. These were the steps leading to Pernell's success in the theater and on TV as he worked from the bottom up. And that's by M. Bell. So that's interesting. I didn't know he was into all that background stuff. He never directed anything or wrote anything. He probably would have been a fabulous director. I guess he just wasn't interested in doing that. Here's a little snippet from, I think this is an interview with Pernell's mother in 1962. She says, "You know, talking about my son like this makes me feel so much closer to him, and it's a pleasure to remember things about him. I can never forget the time when Pernell used to hate wearing hats, but the school band uniform required everybody to wear one. However, every time Pernell was in a parade, somehow he had lost his hat and would go bareheaded. When he graduated from high school, he managed to convince the principal to not let him wear a hat on graduation day. The principal finally agreed because he knew if Pernell wouldn't have listened to him anyway. My son sure had a cute little way with the teachers," he smiled. Beware of the charmers. He seemed to work on them like he did on his mother. Well, he was an only child, so yes, he was their world. Whenever he wanted something, he always got his way. That is very telling. The only time I ever asked Pernell to do me a favor was when he was in high school and he wanted to play football. I didn't worry about any other sport. I was just afraid he would break his hip again, like he did when he was 8 years old. I guess the truth of the matter was I really never wanted him to give up his music. I knew that would mean more to him someday than football. I guess a mother's intuition is right." Well, that's funny about talking. I mentioned his hip before. He fell out of a tree. But I guess he got over the hat thing. He's always wearing hats. He's never without a hat. It's so funny. Look at all the characters that he ever played wore hats. It's just so funny that his mother says he hated to wear hats. But I guess as he got older, he's wearing a cap. Even as he got older, I guess he started losing his hair. He needed the protection of a hat. Let's go on here. This is the same interview in 1962. "All my son wants to be is a good actor. He lives for his art. When he was stationed at Quantico, Virginia, he stayed with my sister when he could get off base, and he told me that's when he got interested in the Arena Theater. When he got out of the service, he went back to University of Maryland. He stayed with my sister again, and she's told me he was more interested in studying scripts. We saw Pernell last Easter in Atlanta. He had little Chris with him. Those two young men of mine really get along fabulously. They just love each other, and when I look at Chris, it's like looking at Pernell all over again." That is so sweet. Here they are. Here's Pernell with Chris on the Mike Douglas show. Yeah, he's passed away from a motorcycle accident, but that's sweet. What else have we got here? This is again from the same interview. "The Roberts live in a single-roof brown house trimmed with white. There is a big garden in the back in addition to a huge front yard. The street on which they live, Clinton Street, is quiet and simple. Pernell's mother wore a fresh-looking pink dress and white sandal-type shoes when she greeted me at the door. Her house was immaculately clean. Pictures of Pernell hung all over the room. She began telling me, 'This is my way of being close to Pernell. I miss him sometimes, and I just can't stand it. I was hoping my husband and I could move to the coast so we could be closer to Pernell, but my husband doesn't want to. He's too settled in Waycross. But I am still hoping. I guess that's why we really haven't fully unpacked. We've only lived here about a year. The dining room was the same color as the parlor. On every wall in the house hung pictures of Pernell. Mrs. Roberts explained her gallery. One day I got so lonely for Pernell, I took out every single picture I ever had of him and made my own sort of gallery. I miss him so much. That's so sad. Look at it. Here's Pernell with his mom. Oops, sideways, upside down. And you can see in the background up here is her little gallery of pictures of him. But that's acting. That's being a working actor. You're all over the place. You're all over the world. It's just hard to, see mom and dad. So, got a couple more things here. During my trip in 1982, I met a girl in her mid-20s or so by the name of Denise. She'd grown up in Waycross, and when she was little, her family lived down the street from Pernell's parents. Denise's mother was always making jellies or pickles or canning something or other. Whenever she made something, she would send Denise to the Roberts for a jar of whatever. Denise loved going there because Mrs. Roberts would always have a treat for her, like candy or cookies or milk. One day when she went on an errand, Mrs. Robert asked her in and said, "Oh, I don't believe you've ever met our son." They went into the living room, and who do you think was sitting on the couch? Adam Cartwright. Denise was floored. Pernell invited her in to sit on the couch next to him, and Mrs. Roberts served the cookies and milk. Pernell asked Denise all about school, her hobbies, family, what she liked to do for fun, and on and on. She felt so comfortable just sitting, talking with him. When she said her goodbyes, she ran all the way home and burst into the house yelling to her mother about who she'd just met. Her mom just laughed and said, "But I told you that man on TV was Roberts' son." Apparently in her child's mind, she'd never made the connection. She connected it that day. As Denise told me in the story, her eyes sparkled, a not uncommon trait among those in Waycross as they speak of Pernell. She said that over the years she marveled at how and why a man like him would bother to express such an interest in a little girl. He treated her as if she was someone important, and whenever she thought of that day, she remembered how Pernell made her feel so very special. That is, it doesn't say who this, it's just a woman named Denise who lived in Waycross at the time. And here's pictures of, I did a little research, here's pictures of Waycross in the 40s. So this is where Pernell would have grown up, in Waycross, little town in Georgia. So that's what it would have looked like to Pernell as he's growing up. I've got one more thing here. This is, I've mentioned this before, it's Betty Endicott. Who was Pernell's understudy in Bonanza. Stand-in, I shouldn't say understudy, it was his stand-in for lighting and blocking. I was working with Pernell on Trapper John ND, and we used Hollywood Pedestrian Hospital as the exterior for the show. One day we were sitting out in front of the hospital filming. I was always stayed close to Pernell and kind of rode shotgun for him when we were out in public. So Pernell is sitting there reading a paper, and I'm sitting behind him just looking around, and someone taps me on the shoulder. I turn around, and there's Michael. I said, "Michael, what are you doing here?" He shushed me and told me to be quiet. He said he was there to see his mother, but wanted to surprise Pernell. I knew Pernell would be thrilled to death to see him. So Michael snuck up on Pernell and tapped him on the shoulder and said, "Hi, Pernell." Pernell turned around and yelled, "Mike!" And he stood up, and they hugged and embraced and were so happy to see each other. It did my heart good that other people could see that there wasn't this animosity that they talked about. These kinds of things don't happen when you hate somebody or resent somebody. The two of them sat down and had a nice long visit. I wasn't involved, it wasn't my party, but I observed from afar. They spent a great deal of time just laughing and talking and having a wonderful time. So that's always good to hear, because you do hear, like when Pernell left, that there was anger and everyone was upset, and I'm sure they were, but they just knew that he had to do what he had to do, and he had to leave. At that time in his life, it wasn't working for him. So I'm going to leave it there and come back to the next one, and I'll continue on with a few more stories. Bye.